The world has changed. This could take some of my job. Okay, yeah, but what else could you be doing? I don't have to do that spreadsheet, or I don't have to do that data entry. I can kind of just do a 4-eye check on it. We had the CoStar floppy disks come in once a week, and it got uploaded into the one PC in the corner that was the reference point for looking at activity in the market.
Do you think most real estate people ever got over the loss of BlackBerries?
No. There's definitely some out there who I think stockpiled when they knew they were going out. So much potential with generative AI. You're able to spend more time with your customers, your clients. Soft skills are super important, probably becoming even more important. Added value isn't just on being nice and friendly, but actually being able to be that better advisor. I'm an optimist by nature. So I'm looking at it and going, where are all the positives? Of course there are risks. Where's it going? Who can see it? Who owns it? Or anything around legal.
Welcome to Bricks, Bytes and Bold Moves, the future of real estate. Today we're talking with Vanessa Hale, who's head of research and insights at BNP Paribas Real Estate. Welcome, Vanessa. It's great to have you here.
Thanks, Johnny. Delighted to be here.
So I'd love to start by asking you how your kind of real estate story, like how did you begin in the industry?
I'm an accidental into the real estate industry. I started when I was 15 in industrial real estate, and then thought I'm going to go to university, do something completely different. And real estate drew me back in through great mentoring. Ended up landing a job doing I think an unofficial grad program in the real estate industry, which really set me on the path for where I am today.
That's amazing. And I guess I am imagining 15-year-old Vanessa in a warehouse, basically. I feel like that needs a little bit more detail.
It does.
There must be a story there.
It does. And I think, real estate has a tendency to have people, you end up finding out about it really from, families and friends.
Yeah.
And it was actually an industrial real estate office. They were a family office focused on industrial real estate back in Chicago.
Yeah.
And I was doing kind of admin, secretarial. I was sitting there joking with my team this morning, thinking about it. We had the CoStar floppy disks come in once a week, and it got uploaded into the one PC in the corner that was the reference point for looking at activity in the market. And it was, it was interesting. Probably not as interesting as it is today. But it was an interesting toe into the real estate markets.
And I guess over that time, you referenced it there, technology has been, maybe not as fast as today, but an ever-changing piece in the industry. Like, what are the moments that stand out in changing technology?
Okay, that's good. Floppy disk.
Floppy disk is a good one. That's a great starting point.
Start there. I can remember Palm Pilots and Blackberries and...
Do you think most real estate people ever got over the loss of BlackBerries?
No. There's definitely some out there who I think stockpiled when they knew they were going out. That secretly pull them out every now and again. No, they're definitely a soft spot for certain individuals. Google.
Yeah.
Email addresses. Communication. Mobile phones, iPhone. We look at now social media, but actually from a tech perspective, MySpace before Facebook. Yeah. Those were definitely some of the earlier things that really, I suppose, were foundational when I was, building my career at the early start. Yeah. And then I think as I said, I kind of took a little time out from the real estate industry where I was probably more R&D and very much in a different field. So skipping over that part, coming then back into real estate, I kind of think I moved to the UK in 2011, but for me, kind of 2014, 2015, 2016, that for me was where US prop tech really kicked off. And I think of things like WiredScore and Convene and WeWork and Airbnb, which are all different ways of using real estate, but really fundamentally driven by tech behind it. That was kind of an area that I suppose was a bit of a pivot for me. Aha moment, right? There's a lot more going on here than just buildings.
Yeah, I guess is that when introducing the kind of digital layer as opportunity rather than just a better map.
Yeah, it was very much that recognition of it. Yeah.
And what are you excited about these days?
Everything AI? No. Genuinely, I mean, I think there's so much potential with generative AI. Let's focus on that because that's why we're here today, right?
Yes.
I think it has a massive ability to allow humans to really demonstrate what humans are great at doing, and whether that's demonstrating collaboration, all those soft skills, whether communication, giving someone the best service possible, because it helps with alleviating some of that busy work, for lack of a better description. I think is quite an exciting opportunity.
I had someone describe a different industry as very relational. I think that fits real estate very nicely.
Yeah.
And in relational industries, that opportunity is to focus, give people time back, focus on the relational aspect of the industry and lean into that, right?
Yeah. I mean, I think for the fact that for the most part, the built environment is bricks and mortar of some description. Yeah. To be able to go, we're all in this industry because we're probably more likely to be people that are like other people. And I think, the relationship side of it, move away from that transaction aspect and really become strategic advisors and own those relationships in a better way. It's a really nice way to put it.
Sounds like you're in the human-centered AI camp then, rather than the AI will take my job camp.
Definitely. I mean, don't get me wrong. I think there are certain roles that will go away naturally, but that is attrition on every level. Regardless of what tech has come in, there have been things that have disappeared.
Yes.
We don't have gentlemen in lifts pushing buttons for us anymore. The world has changed.
Yeah.
Technology moves us forward and we find new things to do. That's, again, another element of being humans.
And thinking a bit about, because I think one of the things I was excited about talking to you about is you have a view of the whole industry across all the different sectors, which I think is rare because, as we all know, the industry is kind of made up of many smaller industries and sometimes they can be quite separate. So what's going on? That's if that's not too big a question.
What's going on? So I think I'll put geopolitics aside. I think that's a fair assumption. Move that off to the left, and probably an element of the economic side. From a commercial standpoint, every single asset class within commercial real estate, whether it's offices, where we're still having the kind of, I go with BC and PC. It's kind of before COVID and post COVID.
Right, yes, makes sense.
Post COVID, the return to work was, or working from home, or flexible working, or hybrid working, whatever label you want to put on it. It is still changing the workplace, which is impacting on offices. Still impacting on residential. How people live in their homes and what people are looking for in their homes. I would suggest that perhaps open plans are a little bit less appealing, perhaps.
That makes sense. Yeah.
Where
one
you kind
giant
of
office, and
one
kitchen
giant office,
and
kids running around. All of a sudden, actually, some closed doors, and might be something you want, or a garden at the bottom of or shed at the bottom of the garden. But also retail. We saw a huge amount of growth with e-commerce. It was the e-commerce train was already going. It just accelerated. That in itself led to industrial and the logistics, and we had obviously supply chain issues.
I saw that e-commerce market growth chart that just always was going up recently, and it's not anymore, is it?
It's not anymore. Gosh. Everyone's realized. Well, I think there's an element of the environment that's come in, and I think there's probably some economic elements to that as well. But I think perhaps that element of the e-commerce of we know what works and what doesn't work, so that whole omni-channel really is coming to, I think, a lot of people having a good amount of clarity. I think the returns market is still one that might need a little bit of finessing. But you also saw with the AI, with
Yeah.
with the growth of data. What's the latest stat? It was like 400 million terabytes of data get created a day or something to that effect.
Yeah.
So it's a bonkers number,
Yeah.
but actually that from an industrial perspective is actually data center growth.
Yeah.
Huge area for us in the UK. Residentially, you see things from virtual viewings, little bit of the AR as well, but
Yeah.
that's probably not quite here yet. Just before COVID, so that BC window, I think we started to see some of the blockchain. I think 2018, 2019 debate who had it first, but there were some transactions that were done in the UK on Resi, which, I think that's been a little bit quieter since. But I
It
think
hasn't exactly been the start of a
no, it's not been a revolution.
sort of dominoes falling over, as it were.
No, but because I think it's the realization it's not easy.
Yes.
And as you said, kind of covering all spectrums. When I look at the rural side, people sometimes give me a funny look, but the rural industry has been, and the agricultural side of the UK has, been quite tech savvy, whether it's looking at how to measure soil or looking at the weather and climate and everything to do with yield optimization, and biotechnology and engineering on crop. It's the spectrum of tech on the agricultural space is quite big. Plus, you have the element of, because we have had this move on, being able to do some hybrid working, you actually have an entire rural economy that's also doing that kind of secondary jobs and coming up with
Good point.
with new jobs. And
All you need is a good internet connection.
Exactly, and that's it. And it's making sure that the broadbands work, and that's probably been the area that is maybe holding back some of those areas. So it's it's wide spectrum of things going on.
I guess like before, like what are the things that stand out as the shifts in technology that have had the biggest impact over in recent years, over the last 10 years or so? So if we pre-COVID, I guess we're talking
pre-COVID,
pre
the BC time frame. So for me, I think residentially, I would say it's probably been the virtual reality and marketplaces. I think actually being able to look at a plethora of homes, and whether that's through social media or any of the platforms that exist, I think that's been a big game changer.
Do you think that market's really changed since the portal, say, in a radical way? I feel like I have a very my market-changing residential plays were Zoopla and Rightmove in the UK and Zillow in the US.
Yeah, I mean, I think right now you're seeing a lot of people trying to step in from a tech perspective, and how do they make the process a little less painful?
Yeah.
I think the platforms are there, and then they're like, okay, how do we streamline this?
Yeah.
How do we make it a little bit smoother? I don't think anybody's quite got it right yet, but I think
there's so much opportunity there.
Huge amount of opportunity.
Yeah, having bought residential homes at scale, it's quite well. We talk a lot about like the document heavy processes and the most painful, most document heavy process, and that rates certainly in the top 5 in the industry.
Yeah, and if you're buying something or you're selling something, it's so stressful. So it's an extraordinarily emotional process. So yeah,
you're reading 100-year-old lease whilst trying to buy the house you love, that you've got a survey report that may or may not mean it's falling down.
Yeah, like I think other things like on the commercial side, I think it is things about. I'm going to go for buildings and thinking through how we manage those buildings.
Yes, yeah.
That's, I think, been a big game changer, and I think it's only going to continue to improve, whether that's from the simple elements of tenant billing, but actually even more fundamental to that is my US Green Building hat on, thinking through things like how we actually operate the building in a more environmentally efficient way. And I think we all would agree that there's a serious amount of road work to still be done there.
Yes.
So I think there's quite a lot on the management side of buildings.
Yeah, it's a huge opportunity. It's,
Again, huge opportunity.
It's a difficult one though, because it's expensive to implement in existing buildings, right? Maybe expensive is the wrong word, but harder than easy.
The viability
Yeah.
definitely is questionable, but I think ESG has really I suppose that's another kind of PC. It was starting before,
Yeah.
but it's really post, in the sense that everyone's recognized the contributions that the built environment has to play on an environmental front, and I think that's you have to weigh it all up. It's no longer a simple solution. It's actually, well, if I can install this technology, I might find out that the tenants are never using the 6th floor. Okay, well, we need to figure out why.
Yeah.
Which I think is, the way the apps work today for tenants is phenomenal.
Might even have implications for renewal. Could be coming up in the next year or two.
Exactly. Yeah.
And how do you feel that AI, I guess particularly the latest kind of steps forward with generative AI, plays into this somewhat messy landscape?
I think it has massive potential, because I suppose if I go back to your earlier question where you're thinking about, landmark things that impact from a technology standpoint, and I very much remember DeepMind, AlphaGo, was it 2016? Must have been.
Something like that,
and it was one of those where you sit there and go, okay, machine learning is taking a whole different spectrum, and then but not actually really being able to onboard it into what does that mean for real estate. It really hadn't triggered.
Yes.
Whereas generative AI, I think, ChatGPT, November 22, I think will be another kind of one of those landmark moments where you sit and go, right, I get this. I can see the potential. How it gets unlocked is, and how people use it. Hopefully I'm an optimist by nature. So I'm looking at it and going, where are all the positives? Of course there are risks, but the positive side of it, actually being able to remove some of that busy work. And indeed, just some of the other creative outlets, was with some architects who have done some, fantastic drawings and designs that, I don't think they'll ever be built, but they were pretty cool to look at.
Well, and they fuel creativity, right?
They fuel the creativity.
I'm not sure if the first drawings are ever built.
No, probably not. Very true.
Although I can be corrected on that. I'm sure.
Somebody will say, yes, they have.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I guess one of the things I find is common with almost everyone I speak to is everyone has an aha moment personally, where unlike with DeepMind and AlphaGo, they've been playing around with a tool and they've asked a question or done a piece of work or someone's shown something that they've been like, oh wow, I didn't know a computer could do that.
Yeah.
I wonder if you have one of those moments and if you would share.
Well, I think one of those moments would actually be when we were having some time with Ellie.
Yeah.
And
for context, Ellie being our AI worker colleague.
And the recognition that, as much as I've said it's all about helping on that busy work, was actually the aha moment of education, which I hadn't really kind of placed as something that could be a win from a generative AI.
Yeah.
But it was a point in which the team, there was a recognition that actually I didn't know that, and I've just been taught something, which was a pretty cool experience to be part of.
That I love that. That's such a neat use case as well. And I think it's one. If you follow the popular discourse, when people talk about education and Gen AI, they talk about the threat to homework, which is kind of missing the point.
Maybe researchers, we're naturally, we're curious individuals.
I think I personally that's probably one of my main use cases, right? Like as a founder of a business, I am confronted with things I don't know all day, every day, which is fun. And having an intelligent machine that can answer my questions and explain things in weird and wonderful ways that work for me really, really help. Yeah. I definitely remember doing some kind of deep Q&A over some data science concepts that I'd never really got my head around. Early days of ChatGPT, and just being like, oh, that's how it works. I've never thought about it that way. It's kind of a personal tutor, right? A little bit like a personal tutor.
A little bit like, cool. Yeah. And that was something like that I just wasn't really on my radar.
Yeah.
I think there was, for me, anytime anyone said, okay, you're thinking about generative AI, it had to be about education, and it was, you need to upskill your data skills, you need to upskill.
Yes,
it wasn't actually you could use this to help you to improve.
Yes, yeah. I think that's one of the other kind of what that hints at is also there's sort of reasoning skills or capability in the models. And if you're helping with education, maybe you can help with supporting decision making, kind of risk-based decisions, flagging bad decisions, that kind of stuff. Which is obviously the other hot debate is kind of how much intelligence is there in the machine. And I sometimes see people write off a load of really interesting use cases of more intelligent systems in real estate with an argument of, oh, they're just predicting words, they're dumb, kind of thing.
Yeah, they don't understand the nature of the nuances behind it. And they write it off, which I think is unfortunate because as a human-centered individual likes to approach things, it can be a very useful, powerful tool. It should present cool things.
And the other side of this, obviously, we talked a lot about the industry.
Yeah.
But this also affects your day-to-day work, of course.
It does.
So what's changed, or what's changing, and
what's
what will
changing?
Change?
I'm having a lot of conversations, probably because I seem to have been, someone used the word pioneer, which I question because I think you're probably more of a pioneer than I am. I'm a user, but maybe I fall into that early adopter category. Is actually the amount of conversations that I'm having, whether it's with internal colleagues, clients, trying to explain the journey that we're on and where we're at, because it is a new technology in lots of ways, and how we're using it and how we're not using it. Continuing to do POCs, and I suppose an element of exploring what works and what doesn't work. And I know, the hallucinations aside, there is still wins that can be made. But it's I suppose embedding in the right procedures. Of course, a big corporate entity. Lots of procedures and lots of risks, and looking at things in lots of different ways.
The phrase change management comes to mind.
Change management comes to mind. Yep. But that's the big things. But the busy work aspect, some, but actually I think probably maybe because I'm interested in it, I can find myself going down a warren. As I'll say to the team, you're like, okay, take your head back out. We got to get back on with work. So it can be a different kind of time distraction because you get into it. Probably only someone that's in research might say that.
I like that. You're I can imagine you being like, I want to get to the end of this. I want to understand how this works. I'm going to really dig deep and see if I ask this, what happens? What if I ask it that way?
Which it can be a little challenging on the time front, but in a good way, because as I said, I think you end up sharing then that best practice, and that's the stage that I think we're at is where are the wins. This is the best way to do that. Probably wouldn't recommend doing it this way and having those conversations. And
when you're playing the role of AI innovator, Like, what are the questions people are asking? What are the? I guess I'm kind of what are the people in the industry you're speaking to excited about, and what are they worried about?
So I'll start with, I suppose, the challenges or
Yeah.
worries first, which I think the risk and security factors, which naturally most, I think, corporate entities are going to have that concern.
Is that primarily around where's your data going?
Yeah, where's it going?
Yeah.
Who can see it?
Who owns it?
Who owns
Yeah.
it? Second, probably being hot, true corporate. Is this copyrighted? Anything around legal, like, it definitely comes up quite a lot. But then it's how do I talk? How do I talk to? How do I write? And how do I get the best answers? And
Yes, yeah.
well, how do I get? Interesting enough, I had one which is like, well, can I get a consistent same answer every time? And
It's a good question. Yeah.
like, haven't thought of it that way. I've actually been trying to force it to come up with different answers.
Yeah.
So, if you're looking at certain, say you're trying to do a lease review,
Yeah.
you would probably want the exact same elements to be extracted every single time.
Yes, yeah, absolutely.
So it's, figuring out when you want that creative output versus when you want something that's very standard,
Yeah.
can be.
It's technically quite difficult getting the same thing every
Yeah.
time because,
I don't think I've seen it, to be honest. And I'm sure you probably know all the reasons why. But that is one of the I think that some of the challenges. But I think the upside is then everyone's like, only now and again do you got kind of one of those like, this is a little bit, this could take some of my job. Okay, yeah, but what else could you be doing?
Yes,
And
yeah.
let's turn it to the positives, But I think the everybody seems to be going, that I'm talking to, I should say, at least, is, so I don't have to do that. I don't have to do that spreadsheet, or I don't
Yes,
have to
yeah.
do that data entry, or, I could connect this with that, and I can kind of just do a 4-eye check on it.
Yeah.
Yes.
I was talking to someone the other day one of our customers who realized they could download their Salesforce dashboards and just send them to Ellie, and I was just so happy about it.
all of a sudden, like,
So
light bulbs of,
happy,
oh my
yeah.
gosh, this is amazing. Yeah. So I think there's probably more of and actually there's another step that I take probably before I even get to the part around generative AIs, is probably an explanation of where that sits within the wider AI sphere.
Yeah.
Which I think helps some people. It's like, okay, you got comfortable with talking to Alexa, or saying you like and dislike on Netflix.
Yeah.
It's a different form of AI, but it's
Interesting. I have mixed feelings about that, because the technologist in me obviously wants everyone to understand everything from first principles as deeply as possible. But the realist, let's say, or pessimist, wonders whether how useful that is for actual understanding. Like some of the, because the standard advice of like, if you want to learn how to use an AI, here are all these free courses, and they'll explain what transformers are and the kind of attention mechanism and how things work. But they're at such an abstract level that I do wonder how useful they are.
I definitely don't
For the
go
average
that.
person.
I definitely don't go that tech heavy. But it's putting people in a
Well, I guess I
consciousness.
feel like,
But I would agree
Yeah.
with you. You don't necessarily need to know, if you like eating sausages, you don't necessarily need to know all the steps that got it to the sausage. It's kind of the same principle, I suppose. Bad analogy, but
yeah.
get my point.
But we've not really created the metaphors to make it really intuitive to understand what's
No,
happening under the
and
hood,
that's where I think trying to communicate to get people to understand. Okay, yeah, I understand this. I talk to my Siri, or I talk to
Yeah.
Alexa, or okay, I'm following a thought process here.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think one of the really unusual things with the technology, unlike previous technology ways, is the immediate availability, and also how close the consumer experience is to the sort of foundational parts of the technology. Like the first version of ChatGPT was very, very close to the models, the API to the model, the interface to the model, but which has two consequences. One, everyone's excited about it. That's awesome. That's great. But the other is that I think when we look back, we'll look at kind of the tools we use today and be like, I can't believe that's how we used to interface with intelligent machines. Like, I feel like we're that, like, what will the interface for intelligent machines, particularly in work, particularly in real estate, is a live question, and something we're aiming to answer, but we're just very early days at.
I have not given that as much thought as you have. But I take your point. I'm sure, as I alluded to, Palm Pilots and what we have today, the world changes, technology will move. I'm sure it will be different. I think that's probably what we could agree on, is that it will look very different than it does today. Yes,
definitely. How is a great question, I think. Like when you kind of talked about the sort of, I guess, the more detailed how, like, how should I speak to an AI assistant kind of thing. But I guess I'm curious about the more like organizational how, like, how do we train people? How do we kind of teach them? How do we find use cases that are worth focusing on? Like, how do you answer that how?
That's a harder how.
It is, yeah.
I think there's things like making sure your data house is in order.
Yeah.
First and foremost, and that you have I would say, I think one of the things is actually having an understanding of the data skill set across your organization on even if it's very high level.
Yeah. That's an interesting angle, yeah.
I think.
What might that look like, do you think?
Well, it's funny. We were having a conversation, and I was talking to someone in the business, and came to find out that they'd written their dissertation on artificial intelligence.
Amazing.
Completely left field. Yeah. Relatively newer in person into the industry. Yeah. But it was like, oh, how do we leverage that? That's an amazing, bit of information that actually can be quite powerful for the operation of a business. But then I think it's things like companies having to understand their process and their procedures, and not at such a high level that you have to have probably 50% of the detail.
Yes, yeah.
Because if you just have kind of this organogram of, it goes from here to here,
yeah,
you're not going to be able to identify where there's
land
leverage points. Out. Yeah, like
sorted.
Okay,
AI in the middle.
Yeah, just put this in the middle and then come out and it'll be fine. It doesn't work. But I don't think every company probably has that real clarity.
Yes.
So I suppose there is an element from an organizational standpoint of what everybody does in their day jobs is going to get a little bit more scrutinized, but with hopefully the upside being finding those use cases, as you've elaborated on.
I do think as an industry, many workflows are much less structured than in kind of comparable industries. Like, I jokingly have referred to them as like artisanal workflows, lovingly crafted, totally different each time, totally unique every time you do it. And I guess,
of course, because every office building is very different.
Well, quite, yeah. Every building is very different. And I have two competing thoughts on that, and one of them you just highlighted is I think some of that work will get more standardized and more repeatable. But equally, if your system you're working with is intelligent, it doesn't have to be done the same way. So maybe the technology can actually help you out, even if you haven't got into the point where you've got a standard operating procedure for every process. And you've got enough flexibility that maybe the person who does the development appraisal, let's say, a different way every time can still do that, and get help kind of in a consistent way.
Yeah. I like that vision.
Yes, yeah.
I'm not one that likes to do the same thing over and over again.
Yeah.
So I'm with you on the
Because I guess like
the fluid factor that the AI could bring is quite a nice thought.
Because that's kind of the big part of the opportunity. I think is that personalization, and your kind of you as a professional being amplified by intelligent tools, and the way we used to do that, and I've built products that do this myself, so I'm definitely guilty. I've been guilty of building products myself where you need everyone to kind of adopt a standard workflow, and if they do the same thing in the same way every time, maybe there's even a Kanban board, you can track the things across it. Then there's a big saving, but maybe that's not appropriate, or maybe that doesn't work for everyone. Yep. And I think one of the really exciting things about having more personalized adaptive technology is that actually you can meet the user where they are and add that automation, that benefit to their workflow that could be different most times, or all the time. And it does range though, because there is also the more industrialized part of the industry where stuff is standardized, and there's.
Yeah, but I think actually that's also the beauty of this industry.
Yeah.
I think the built environment industry as a whole attracts a very eclectic group of people, because you do have individuals who are focused and do something that is very standardized.
Absolutely.
Day in and day out. And then you have at the other end those that are doing completely different things every single day.
I feel like there's lots of processes that are very standardized but rely on a lot of professional skill and judgment. Like
Yes.
Valuation obviously comes to mind.
Valuation comes to mind.
Any kind of surveying, really.
Yeah.
And I guess thinking about takeaways and advice for our listeners, what would you counsel someone listening to the podcast thinking about the future and how they can, I guess, adapt to the changes, get the benefit of what's happening with our technology right now, with the kind of AI wave?
So I think for people that are in real estate today or thinking about entering, and I've already alluded to education.
Yeah.
I think that's first and foremost. I think being open to technology, which, believe it or not, I think there are some individuals, as we joked about, with still hanging on to those Blackberries. There is an element of comfort and creature comforts that sneak in. But
There's
actually,
a lot of print out and redlining that still goes on, right?
Yeah, like I won't get distracted. So I think being open to tech. I think being aware of. There probably is an element of, we didn't really touch on it, but being aware of kind of the regulation.
Yeah.
I'm part of a very large organization that has a significant amount of regulatory from a financial standpoint. Real estate has regulation, but it's in a very different camp. So I think having that conscious awareness of what's on the cards is probably important. As much as I talked about having to also then do data skills, and I think improvement on that across the board is actually also continuing to improve on soft skills.
Yeah,
and whether that's
the other side.
It's the other side, because if in principle generative AI gives you the opportunity to not have that busy work, and you're able to spend more time with your customers, your clients, your family, your friends.
Yeah.
Soft skills are super important, probably becoming even more important. I think I kind of alluded on the customer. I think identifying the customer pain points on whatever journey they may be on that you're helping to facilitate. I'm speaking from an advisory standpoint. That's where you're going to find wins. And in principle, I think generative AI will help deliver answers quicker to that customer.
Yes, yeah.
And so your added value isn't just on being nice and friendly, but actually being able to be that better advisor. Yeah.
It's interesting. Time to value, that speed of turnaround seems to be coming up a lot more right now. Of like, there's a really hard question. It would have taken me 2 weeks to answer, and I can do it in 2 hours now, kind of thing.
Yeah, and I think, and so then balancing that expectation and working through that, there's a whole bunch of things that are going to come through that. I kind of talked about sharing best practice.
Mm-hmm.
I think probably collaborating with prop tech,
right? Yeah,
companies is really important. I probably would say that, but also just wider industry. And building your network. Again, I probably would be one to say that, but I think sharing of all the best practices is super important. And I think it's only going to become even, more so.
Yeah.
But I also, I suppose the other element is just being flexible and having fun with it. It's kind of, I think it's exciting. I don't think when I had my first iPhone was I like, this is going to change my world. It feels different, and I think the opportunity is quite exciting.
What about Google Maps though? I feel like Google Maps might be one of the underappreciated technology.
Google Maps might fall in the camp of that was quite exciting.
It crept up on us.
Probably.
Remember the original Google Earth that you had to download separately.
And print it out on an A4 and bring it with you.
Yeah.
No.
Draw a red line around it. Yeah.
Yeah. Maybe Google Maps.
Save
might be
on your
there.
Pro Maps subscription.
Definitely. Yeah.
And one of the things that I'm really keen for everyone to share is like something practical, something the audience can take away today and do that will maybe teach them something that might create some change. What would you pick?
So I think some people might say, like, go and have a conversation with a young child at home, or someone that you can access that is at the younger end of the spectrum. I actually think I'd take it the other way and say, go and have a conversation with your parents or grandparents or someone older who, I kind of talked through like my tech journey. Their tech journey is totally different than, what I've experienced, but actually how they approach and look at, go on ChatGPT.
Yeah. See what happens.
See how they think. And because it just gives you that, like, okay, that's an interesting answer, and it's not at all how I would have approached it. I think it's it's fascinating. I've done both. I've actually done both, but I think the parents was the more interesting of the two.
I feel like I naturally gravitate more to those stories of like, I showed my parents ChatGPT and now my dad's, speaking to every day, or like, my grandma's now using Perplexity for everything. Like,
okay, be careful what you do, I guess. Yeah, exactly. Kind of like, oh, I can't believe I did that. That could be a problem and a half, but yeah. In a good way.
Well, thank you so much, Vanessa. Really appreciate you coming on the show, and really enjoyed your insights.
No, happy to be here. It's a delight.
Amazing.
Thank you.